Welcome to True Crime Case Studios. The story we unravel today is one of hidden love, betrayal, and a shocking murder that stunned the community. This is the tragic tale of David Hamilton, a well-respected local businessman whose life was cut short by a brutal act of violence. David Hamilton was a 54-year-old man living in Riverside, California. He owned a pest control company called Hamilton Pest Control, which was well known in the community. David was known for his bright personality and his love for 19th century Western art. He often visited local art galleries and attended art shows, where he was a familiar face. David lived in a nice suburban house with his wife, Lisa Hamilton. They had been married for 22 years. Lisa was 46 years old and worked as an accountant. Their marriage had its ups and downs, mainly because David was very private about his personal life, even with his wife. Despite the issues and rumors of David cheating, Lisa was always loyal to David. David was known for being kind and generous. He often donated to local charities and supported community events. People in the neighborhood liked him a lot. He had a large circle of friends who admired him for his cheerful and friendly nature. David had a dream of expanding his business and opening new branches in other cities. He also wanted to buy a new piece of art for his collection. Just a few days before his death, he was excited about a business deal and was planning to attend an auction of Western art in Fort Worth, Texas. On October 10, 2021, David spent the day meeting with clients and planning his next business moves. That evening, he had dinner with his wife and their two college-age kids at a popular restaurant in Riverside called the Old Spaghetti Factory. They talked about their future and their plans for the holidays. David seemed happy and was looking forward to the upcoming weeks. David Hamilton was a successful businessman, a loving husband and father, and a beloved member of his community. He had big dreams and a bright future ahead of him, which made his tragic death even more heartbreaking. On the morning of October 15, 2021, at around 8 a.m., David Hamilton's body was discovered by his longtime friend and business associate, Paul Richards. Paul had known David for over 10 years and often stopped by his house to discuss business matters. That morning, Paul was supposed to meet David to talk about a new pest control contract with a big client. Paul arrived at David's suburban house in Riverside, located on Cedarwood Avenue, a quiet street. When David did not answer the door, Paul found it strange. He knew David was always punctual and never missed a meeting. After knocking several times without any response, Paul decided to use the spare key David had given him for emergencies. As Paul entered the house, he immediately felt something was wrong. The house was unusually quiet. Paul called out David's name but got no reply. He walked into the living room, where he found a scene that would haunt him forever. David was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. There were clear signs of a violent struggle, with furniture overturned and blood splattered on the walls. David had multiple stab wounds, and it was clear he had fought hard before he died. Paul was in shock. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone to call 911. The emergency operator answered, and Paul, struggling to keep his voice steady, explained what he had found. The operator instructed him to stay on the line and wait for the police and paramedics to arrive. Paul felt a mix of fear, sadness, and disbelief. He couldn't understand how something so horrible could happen to his friend. While waiting for the authorities, Paul tried to compose himself. He checked to see if there were any signs of life in David, but it was clear that he was gone. Paul sat on the couch, looking around the room and trying to make sense of the chaos. He noticed David's favorite painting on the wall, a piece of 19th century Western art, now stained with blood. The police and paramedics arrived within minutes. Paul met them at the door and led them to the living room. The paramedics confirmed that David was dead, and the police began securing the crime scene. Paul gave his statement to the police. His detailed account would later be crucial in the investigation that followed. The police arrived at David Hamilton's house quickly after Paul Richards called 911 on the morning of October 15, 2021. Detective Sarah Lewis, known for her keen eye for detail, led the investigation. She was accompanied by her partner, Detective Jack Martinez, who was also experienced in handling serious crimes. As they entered the suburban house on Cedarwood Avenue, they were met with a gruesome scene. The living room was in disarray, with furniture overturned and blood splattered on the walls and floor. David's body lay in the middle of the room, surrounded by evidence of a violent struggle. The detectives knew they had a challenging case ahead. Detective Lewis and Martinez began by examining the crime scene. The first thing they noticed was the multiple stab wounds on David's body. It was clear he had fought hard for his life. Near the body, they found the murder weapon, a large kitchen knife covered in blood. They carefully collected it as evidence, making sure not to disturb any potential fingerprints. Forensic experts arrived shortly after to help with the investigation. They used advanced tools to gather fingerprints, blood samples, and other clues from the scene. They took photographs of the entire area, documenting the position of every piece of furniture and every blood stain. The team worked methodically, ensuring they did not miss any vital evidence. Detective Lewis questioned Paul Richards, who had discovered the body. Paul described the scene he found and his actions afterward. His detailed account helped the detectives piece together the initial timeline of events. They learned that David had planned to meet Paul that morning, which made them wonder who else might have known about the meeting. The detectives then turned their attention to the rest of the house. They found no signs of forced entry, suggesting that David might have known his attacker. This information was crucial as it narrowed down the list of potential suspects. They also found David's cell phone on the kitchen counter, which they took as evidence. They hoped it would provide clues about who David had been in contact with before his death. Outside the house, news vans from local TV stations like KABC and NBC4 had started to gather. The shocking murder of a well-known local businessman was big news. Reporters tried to get statements from the police and neighbors, but Detective Lewis declined to comment, saying the investigation was still in its early stages. By the end of the day, the detectives had collected a significant amount of evidence, but many questions remained. Who would want to kill David Hamilton, and why? The investigation was just beginning, and Detective Lewis and her team knew they had a long road ahead. The first person the police investigated was Lisa Hamilton, David's wife of 22 years. Lisa, who was 46 years old, worked as an accountant at a law firm in the San Fernando Valley. She was known for being meticulous and detail-oriented, traits that made her good at her job. Despite her calm exterior, Lisa was deeply affected by David's death. On the afternoon of October 16, 2021, Lisa was brought in for questioning. Detective Sarah Lewis led the interrogation. Lisa appeared composed but was clearly upset. She told the detectives that she and David had a complicated relationship. Though they had their differences, she loved him deeply. Lisa revealed that David had been involved in a secret relationship with a much younger man named Ethan Roberts. This revelation shocked the detectives. Lisa explained that she had found out about the affair a few months earlier and that it had put a significant strain on their marriage. Lisa Hamilton also revealed that David had recently tested positive for AIDS, which had added to the tension between them. The detectives asked Lisa about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. She claimed she was at home, watching TV, and working on some paperwork. She mentioned that she had watched the latest episode of NCIS on CBS, America's #1 show at the time, and had gone to bed around 10 p.m. Her calm demeanor during the interrogation was notable. She seemed cooperative and willing to help the investigation in any way she could. The police also asked Lisa about any financial issues she and David might have had. Lisa explained that they were financially stable and had no significant money problems. She denied any involvement in David's death, saying that while she was hurt by his affair, she would never harm him. Despite her cooperation, the detectives couldn't ignore the motive of jealousy and betrayal. Lisa's revelation about David's affair and his illness added layers to the investigation. They decided to check her alibi and look for any other evidence that might link her to the crime. The detectives also collected Lisa's phone records and financial statements to see if they could find any discrepancies or suspicious activity. They wanted to be thorough, ensuring no detail was overlooked. The investigation into Lisa was intense, but the police knew they had to explore all possible angles to find the truth. Lisa's calm yet emotional demeanor left the detectives with mixed feelings. Was she a grieving widow or a jealous spouse capable of murder? The investigation continued as the detectives searched for answers. Next, the police turned their attention to Ethan Roberts, the man named by Lisa as David's lover. Ethan was a 21-year-old struggling artist living in West Hollywood. He had moved to California from a small town in Iowa, hoping to make a name for himself in the art world. To support himself, he worked as a barista. This was how he met David Hamilton. On October 17, 2021, Ethan was brought in for questioning at the Riverside Police Station. Detective Jack Martinez led the interrogation, wanting to understand Ethan's relationship with David. Ethan was visibly nervous but cooperative. He admitted to having an affair with David and said they had been seeing each other for about a year. Ethan described David as kind and supportive. David had helped him financially on several occasions, paying for his art supplies and rent. Despite their significant age difference, Ethan felt a strong connection to David. He claimed he loved David and that their relationship was worth more than the financial support David gave him. However, he was also aware of the strain their relationship put on David's marriage to Lisa. The detectives asked Ethan about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Ethan stated that he was at his apartment, working on a new painting. He said he had ordered takeout from a local Chinese restaurant called Panda Garden and had spent the evening alone. The detectives noted his calm demeanor, but were aware that Ethan had a lot to lose if the truth came out about his relationship with David. The police also discovered that Ethan had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which sometimes made his emotions difficult to control. He insisted, however, that he would never harm David. Ethan's financial struggles and his reliance on David for support added a potential motive for the police to consider. To verify his alibi, the detectives collected Ethan's phone records and spoke to his neighbors. They wanted to see if anyone could confirm that Ethan had been at home that night. They also looked into Ethan's financial records to check if there had been any unusual transactions. Despite Ethan's cooperation, the police couldn't ignore the possibility that he might have had a role in David's death. His relationship with David and his financial dependency on him made him a person of interest. The detectives continued to investigate, looking for any evidence that could either confirm or disprove Ethan's involvement. Ethan's turbulent emotional state made him a complex figure in the investigation. The detectives knew they needed to dig deeper to understand his role in David's life and possibly in his death. The third suspect in the investigation was Rick Gallagher, a 45-year-old real estate developer. Rick was wealthy and ambitious, known for his ruthless business tactics. He had worked with David's pest control company on several projects, and their professional relationship had always been tense. However, there were rumors of a sexual connection between them as well. On October 18, 2021, the police brought Rick in for questioning. Detective Sarah Lewis took the lead. Rick was confident and composed, but there was a hint of nervousness in his eyes. He admitted that he and David had a complex relationship, both professionally and personally. Rick revealed that he and David had been lovers, something he had kept secret for fear of damaging his reputation. This was a shocking revelation for the detectives, adding another layer of intrigue to the case. Rick also disclosed that he had recently tested positive for AIDS, which he believed he had contracted from David. This news had devastated him, and he was struggling to come to terms with it. The detectives asked Rick about his whereabouts on the night of David's murder. Rick claimed he was at a business dinner at The Grill, a high-end steakhouse in the Brentwood area of Los Angeles. He provided the names of several colleagues who could confirm his alibi. The detectives made a note to follow up with these individuals. Rick's motive for the murder was clear. He was angry and felt betrayed by David. The detectives needed to determine if his anger had driven him to commit the crime. They checked Rick's financial records and phone logs, looking for any evidence of foul play. They also examined his interactions with David in the weeks leading up to the murder. Rick's behavior during the interrogation was mostly calm, but he became defensive when asked about his feelings toward David. He insisted that while he was hurt and angry, he would never resort to violence. He expressed his frustration over the situation and his desire to move on. The detectives left the interrogation room with more questions than answers. Rick's relationship with David and his recent diagnosis made him a prime suspect, but they needed solid evidence to link him to the crime. They decided to dig deeper into his background and recent activities. Rick's ambitious nature and his feelings of betrayal made him a compelling figure in the investigation. The detectives knew they had to explore every angle to uncover the truth about David's murder. On October 20th, 2021, a crucial piece of evidence emerged. It was a rainy Wednesday morning when the police received a call from a neighbor who lived a few houses down from David. The neighbor mentioned finding something suspicious in her backyard, a bloody shirt. Detectives Sarah Lewis and Jack Martinez quickly arrived at Mrs. Green's house on Cedarwood Avenue. They carefully collected the shirt, making sure to preserve any potential evidence. The shirt appeared to be a men's size, and the blood stain suggested it had been worn during the murder. This new evidence was taken to the forensics lab for analysis. The detectives were eager to learn more about the shirt. They hoped it would contain DNA that could point them to the murderer. The forensic team worked swiftly, and within hours they had results. The blood on the shirt matched David Hamilton's blood type. More importantly, the DNA on the collar and sleeves provided a match to Lisa Hamilton, David's wife. Detective Lewis and Martinez discussed the findings. The new evidence cast a dark shadow over Lisa's claims of innocence. The detectives decided to bring her in for another round of questioning. This time, they had solid evidence linking her to the crime scene. On October 21st, 2021, Lisa was brought back to the police station. She appeared anxious as she sat down in the interrogation room. Detective Lewis presented the bloody shirt and the DNA evidence. Lisa's composure began to crack. She claimed she didn't know how her DNA ended up on the shirt and insisted she was being framed. The detectives pressed her for more details, asking about her actions on the night of the murder. Lisa's story started to change. She admitted that she and David had argued that night about his affair with Ethan Roberts. She claimed that David became violent, and she acted in self-defense. However, the detectives found holes in her story. The evidence suggested a premeditated attack rather than an act of self-defense. With the new evidence in hand, the detectives were more convinced of Lisa's involvement. They re-examined the financial records and discovered that Lisa had recently taken out a large life insurance policy on David. This provided a strong motive for the murder. The discovery of the bloody shirt and the subsequent DNA analysis were pivotal in the investigation. The detectives were now closer to uncovering the truth. Lisa's increasingly inconsistent statements and the mounting evidence pointed to her as the prime suspect in David's murder. The police continued to dig deeper into the evidence against Lisa Hamilton. On October 25, 2021, they made a breakthrough. Financial records revealed that Lisa had recently taken out a $500,000 life insurance policy on David. Even more shocking was a $300,000 transfer from David's account to Rick Gallagher shortly after David's death. Detective Sarah Lewis and her team questioned Rick again. This time, they presented the financial records. Under pressure, Rick admitted that Lisa had paid him to lie about being David's lover and having AIDS. Rick confessed that none of it was true and that he had agreed to the scheme for the money. This revelation changed the entire course of the investigation. On October 26, 2021, the detectives confronted Lisa with this new information. Lisa initially denied everything but eventually broke down under intense questioning. She admitted to lying about David having AIDS to damage his reputation and make herself look like a victim. She also confessed to paying Rick to support her false story. Lisa explained that she felt betrayed and humiliated by David's affair with Ethan Roberts. Her anger and jealousy reached a boiling point, leading her to confront David on the night of his murder. During the confrontation, Lisa stabbed David multiple times in a fit of rage. She had hoped that framing him as a diseased, unfaithful husband would help her escape suspicion and garner sympathy. Detective Lewis and her team now had a clear motive and solid evidence linking Lisa to the murder. On October 27, 2021, they arrested Lisa at her home. She was charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to obstruct justice. As the police handcuffed her, Lisa showed little emotion, as if she had accepted her fate. The news of Lisa's arrest shocked the Riverside community. David's family and friends were devastated by the betrayal and the gruesome details of his death. They struggled to understand how someone who had been so close to David could commit such a heinous act. David's children, in particular, were heartbroken. They had lost their father and now faced the reality that their mother was his murderer. The community rallied around them, offering support and condolences during this difficult time. The police publicly commended the detectives for their thorough investigation. The discovery of Lisa's lies and the financial trail had been crucial in solving the case. The arrest brought a sense of justice for David's loved ones, though the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. The trial of Lisa Hamilton began on December 5, 2021, at the Riverside Superior Court. The prosecution, led by District Attorney James Thompson, known for his tenacity and sharp legal mind, presented a compelling case. Thompson argued that Lisa's actions were premeditated and driven by jealousy and greed. He emphasized the life insurance policy and the payment to Rick Gallagher as evidence of her intent to frame David and escape justice. On the defense side, attorney Karen Lee, a seasoned lawyer known for her calm and strategic approach, represented Lisa. Lee argued that Lisa had acted in self-defense during a heated argument with David. She tried to paint a picture of a desperate woman pushed to the edge by her husband's infidelity and lies. The trial was emotionally charged, with David's family and friends filling the courtroom each day. They listened intently as witnesses, including Rick Gallagher and Ethan Roberts, testified. Rick admitted to accepting money to lie about his relationship with David, while Ethan described the nature of his affair with David. The prosecution presented the bloody shirt with Lisa's DNA and the financial records as key evidence. Forensic experts testified about the violent nature of the attack, contradicting Lisa's claim of self-defense. The jury was shown photos of the crime scene, which highlighted the brutality of the murder. During the trial, Lisa maintained a stoic demeanor, but there were moments when she appeared visibly shaken, especially during Ethan's testimony. The emotional impact on David's children was evident. They watched their mother's trial with a mix of grief and anger, struggling to reconcile the woman they knew with the brutal act she committed. On December 20th, 2021, after 2 weeks of testimony and deliberations, the jury found Lisa Hamilton guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The verdict was met with a mix of relief and sorrow by David's family and friends. They had found some justice for David, but the pain of losing him and the betrayal by Lisa remained. The judge sentenced Lisa to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She remarked on the calculated nature of the crime and the lengths Lisa went to cover her tracks. The sentencing brought a sense of closure, but the emotional wounds were still raw. David's family expressed gratitude for the support they received from the community and the relentless efforts of the police and prosecution. While justice was served, the scars of this tragic event would remain with them forever. After Lisa Hamilton's sentencing, life slowly began to return to normal for those involved in David Hamilton's tragic murder case. For David's children, Emma and Jack, both in their early 20s, the road ahead was filled with challenges. They sought solace in their close-knit community of Riverside, finding support from friends and neighbors who had rallied around them during the trial. Ethan Roberts, the young artist whose relationship with David had been at the center of the investigation, tried to focus on his career. He continued to paint and exhibit his artwork in galleries across West Hollywood. The media attention had brought both opportunities and challenges, but Ethan remained determined to build a name for himself in the art world. Rick Gallagher, the real estate developer who had briefly become entangled in the case, retreated from public view. His reputation had taken a hit after admitting to accepting money from Lisa to lie about his relationship with David. Despite this setback, Rick continued to manage his business affairs quietly, keeping a low profile in Riverside. As time passed, life in Riverside gradually returned to normal. The leaves turned golden in the fall of 2021, and the community celebrated Halloween with pumpkin patches and haunted houses. Local news covered stories of resilience and hope, highlighting community events and initiatives aimed at healing and moving forward. For David's children and close friends, the memory of his kindness and generosity remained strong. They found comfort in remembering the good times they had shared with him and in knowing that justice had been served. While the scars of David's murder would never fully heal, the community support and resilience offered a glimmer of hope for the future. This concludes today's episode of True Crime Case Studios. The story of David Hamilton is a stark reminder of how secrets and hidden emotions can lead to devastating consequences. Thank you for joining us as we explored this tragic tale of love, betrayal, and murder. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we will delve into another gripping true crime story. Until then, stay safe and vigilant.